Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and welcome to my channel. My channel is packed with educational content. Currently what you're looking at on the screen is me drawing out a rough three-dimensional sketch of a scene in Blender. I'm fairly new with Blender, but there's so much of what you can do with this software, and it can inspire the imagination and give people so many different ways of using the software. For example, you're able to make a rough 3D model, or you're able to make a rough 3D sketch like the one you see here, and you're able to render out various camera angles of the scene and place those rendered images into Krita, GIMP, Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, or Photoshop, or whatever you're using, and make a comic book that is completely consistent from panel to panel, from camera angle to camera angle. And as a newbie to Blender, this is my primary use of Blender as of right now, using it as a tool to pull into 2D software. I do plan on learning more about Blender and eventually taking advantage of everything it has to offer, but for right now, you don't need to know that much about Blender in order to use it professionally in a professional workflow, in some way. But in general, if you can't seem to find a reference with the pose that you want, or in general you're having difficulty understanding the pose, and let's say you might want to be drawing this image from your imagination, and you're just generally still having problems getting the proportions to work out properly, correctly in your composition, you can always pop open Blender. Draw something similar to what you want in a relaxed pose, and then repose the drawing in 3D space in relationship to the camera, and use that as your rough sketching process. Now, it's not often that I draw fan art, because 90% of the time it means that down the road I won't be able to sell it, but Team Cherry has made a small exception to this rule that exists in copyright law when it comes to their property, Hollow Knight. You might notice that the perspective grid is curved and free-handed, and please keep in mind that all of that was intentional. I love drawing in curvilinear perspective.
More on that later.
And I enjoy freehanding my background. And of course, these days I like having a more formal perspective grid to work with than what I used with this Hollow Knight image. It was a really fun image to work on, and it's actually based on a real location that exists in the game. I even set it as my wallpaper for 6 months there. And I'll be doing this again as soon as Hollow Knight Silk Song comes out. I'm also trying to work on a comic book, though right now I'm mainly just working on trying to get the look of the comic book down by drawing out a bunch of concept images, and many of them may very well become the covers for some of the books down the road. When I'm working on these sorts of images, I sort of think of it as my time to really explore different techniques and generally try out things that I've never done before, and seeing what techniques I like and what techniques I don't think I'll ever use again. It's a really good way to discover what things I need to improve on with my artwork. Many of these sorts of images I wind up giving to my patrons on Patreon as well. As for the footage that's about to pop on the screen, you'll see a rotating box and the perspective grid used to do it. I dabbled with animation, and although I'd like to delve into it more, there are a few roadblocks as well as goals that I want to have completed before I get too far into it again. But my channel is littered with 2D animation tutorials for Blender, but mainly for a free open source piece of software called OpenToonz. And although I feel that I'm done with making OpenToonz tutorials, I would still recommend OpenToonz for 2D animation. Currently on the screen you see footage from the Teach Me to Draw playlist, specifically the
Your Training Wheels to Drawing in Perspective
sub-series, where I teach how you can draw backgrounds with as few rules as possible and still come out with a professional looking image. Perspective is littered with easy to understand and easy to use measuring techniques, but it plays out like the artist's game of chess. Only you're trying to work through a strategic geometric problem in order for you to sculpt a three-dimensional object onto a two-dimensional surface. Now, what's on the screen right now is the Curvilinear Perspective series, where I teach variously different ways of drawing a panoramic image. For the year 2020, I plan on eventually getting around to updating this series with the use of Blender in order to get people to better comprehend what is happening and why the perspective grid is curved. I feel Blender will be the best way to visualize what curvilinear perspective is, why it's so powerful, and why it's my preferred method of drawing my backgrounds. And like I said earlier, drawing is like the artist's game of chess, only you're trying to work through a strategic geometric problem in order for you to sculpt a three-dimensional object onto a two-dimensional surface. It's my favorite game in the world to play, and I hope you'll join me. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me, feel free to join me on Twitter or go ahead and follow me on Discord. A link to both is supplied in the video description below. If you'd like to support my channel, there's an image of my mascot in the upper right corner of the screen right now. It leads to my Patreon. Any support would be much appreciated. And if you've enjoyed this content, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.